welcome to our 51st episode of One Cardinal, One Beer, and One Alcoholic Vince. I'm not drinking. It's just that this team makes me want to drink, and we'll get into the Cub woes soon enough. But anyway, I do ask you to like us on Facebook, follow us on X, contact us through one card, one cup, one beer at gmail.com. You can subscribe to our page by clicking on the icon at the bottom right of the corner, those of you on Mac or PC. And if you're watching this on a television, at the end, you could just go up to the emblem circle and hit enter, and you will be subscribed to us. You can support us through Patreon. Go to patreon.com and search One Cardinal, One Cup, and One Beer. And you can support our efforts as JJ and I are getting ready to move to a Caribbean island to live out our lives because of your Patreon donations. So we do appreciate that. JJ, you've got to be in a better mood than me because at least you've had some positive news this week.
Oh, it's been a long year. Disappointing. Expectations were up here and we played about to down here. But, you know, our 50th episode last week, I have so many people giving us so much love and telling us how much they enjoyed it. The videos that a lot of people said, I didn't know you guys were collecting videos. I would have sent one in. So next year we might just have a show of One Cardinal, One Cub, One Beer fans just saying what they like about the show. So many, I had probably 20 people say that I would have sent a video in if I knew you guys were doing videos. So maybe next year, but it's Tuesday. We're a week and a half left in the season, and it's time to talk some baseball. And baseball. A lot of people said they like baseball. A lot of people like when we just, bring up a topic and kind of talk about it. So I have a few baseball stories to start everything off. And first of all, in St. Louis at the Fieldhouse Museum, they are having an exhibit of the St. Louis Browns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. March 31st to October 29th here in 2023. And their slogan is first, I don't know why this is, but first in shoes, first in booze, and last in the American League. And you can see it in red letters right there. So that's one of their little sayings there. But if you get a chance, if you're in the area, go out and check it out. A lot of artifacts. Ed Wheatley, of course, is the president of the Browns Historical Society. And it's a nice exhibit out there. I haven't been out there yet, but I've talked to a couple people who've been out there. So I'm going to try to make it before the exhibit goes away and check that out. So that's one thing.
Just concerning the Browns, I just think it's completely weird how the Orioles, I guess teams can decide this. You can decide whether or not to pick up the legacy of where you move from. Some teams do, like the A's, whether they've been in Philadelphia, Kansas City, Oakland, or possibly Vegas. They have kept their records and everything as one organization. The Orioles were the Browns. The only thing they changed is the name, but they decided to sever Orioles history for Browns history. We live in St. Louis. We barely hear about the Browns, which makes me wonder what people who are not from St. Louis, do they even know the Browns existed? Because they were a bad organization. You did a great job doing that spotlight on George Sisler a few months ago, their best player. And I learned a lot when you did that spotlight on Sisler. But it just makes me wonder, people who are not affiliated with St. Louis, do they even know they existed? I don't know.
That's a good one. If I go to spring training, I'm thinking about going. A friend of mine wants me to go spring training this year, but he wants to go to Arizona. We've been to Florida 3 times. I'd like to go down there, but the Cardinals are in Florida. But the Orioles also train down in Florida as well. And I've been to their spring training site once, and that and the Tigers are my 2 favorite spring training sites if you ever get a chance. But the Orioles, the Browns had a brown, orange kind of color to their uniform, and the Orioles seem to have adopted some of that same color scheme, but just totally changed it to the Orioles. So that's a good question. In NFL, if a team moves, they don't really take they take some of that history with them, but they kind of want their own identity afterwards. I know St. Louis, when the Rams were here, we also honored the St. Louis Cardinal football team. But I don't know if we get another team, which who knows one day. But I don't know if we're going to still honor the Rams. Well, probably the Super Bowl, but I don't know. I think all that went with them when they left town. The Cardinals and the Rams, of course, their history went back to Los Angeles. Yeah, so I don't know how they do. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead and finish.
Oh, it's just it is puzzling, but I always consider that it's the city's team and that history moved if they like the A's and the Expos and
Braves.
The Nationals.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Braves history just keeps going with them, and I have some things to talk about a little bit later about the Braves as well and their history. So anyway, that's all I had to say on that.
Well, concerning the Browns, have you seen the trailers for the Bill Veeck movie that's going to be coming out?
Yes, I'm excited about it. I was going to talk to you about that. The Saint of Second Chances, about him and his son and the family and everything.
Yeah, that's is that on Max? HBO Max?
I thought it was
Max.
I thought it was Netflix. I thought Netflix. Yeah.
Is it out yet?
I think it just came out. Like
okay.
I don't have the date, but I think it's this week it comes out.
If it comes out this week, why don't we spotlight it next week?
Sounds good. All right, that
cool.
sounds good. Oh yeah. Speaking of that, Bill Veeck gets and his family gets a lot of credit for the I don't know what you call it, the fireworks and the giveaways and all the razzmatazz at the ballparks. It used to just be the game. And then the Vex came along and you could get a haircut or a nun could give you a massage. Just all kinds of stuff is happening at the ballparks. I think you could even take a shower. And
at Old Comiskey, he installed a shower in the bleachers because
it's hot out there in Chicago.
Yeah, they'd show up without shirts on and just get under the shower and get a blast of cold water and go back to cheering.
Oh man! And
Bill planted the ivy in Wrigley.
I did not know that.
Yes, he did.
He had a lot of ideas too, and I think Charlie Finley gets a lot of credit for having like these glow-in-the-dark baseballs, but I think it was Bill Veeck's idea. You'll have to go back. We'll have to watch that special because I'm sure that'll be mentioned too. But what a good baseball man! And did he do the disco demolition? Was that?
Yes, he did.
Well, there's nothing makes me happier than blowing up a bunch of disco albums.
One day,
good, all right.
One day I'll do a spotlight on that because I actually did watch that because that was during a period of my life where I could watch the White Sox games. Okay. And you're like me, a baseball game is like heaven when it's on TV. But when we were growing up, what was really cool is if they had a doubleheader to watch two games in one day, and they were back-to-back doubleheaders back then. That was a doubleheader. That was between games of a doubleheader, and I remember watching that. So I'll do a spotlight on that one day. That was awesome.
There's been some crazy things in baseball history. That'll be great. I only heard about it after it happened. Well, there's a couple players I wanted to talk about with us getting about a week and a half left in the season. Bobby Witt Jr. We're both admire the Royals, and we would like to see them do good. And they've got some good players. And I know it was a bad year, but maybe good things are ahead for them. But Bobby Witt Jr., this kid who was the second pick when he came out of college. And by the way, Adley Rutschman was the number one pick that year by the Orioles, and the Royals took Bobby Witt Jr. They're both happy. Both players are doing great, and they're kind of the face of the team right now. But Bobby Witt Jr. Is one home run away from being in the 30-30 club. So that's pretty cool right there. And that's good for Royals, and I hope they sign him and keep him there for a long, long time. The other thing I was going to talk about is Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman, great player, probably going to be a Hall of Famer one day. He has 55 doubles, and there has only been 6 players with 60 or more doubles, and that all happened between 1926 and 1936. And Todd Helton did have 59. He did play in Colorado, which probably helps a little bit, but Freddie Freeman could make some history here, getting into that 60 double club, although he's only got a week and a half left. But the guy who has the most doubles ever is a guy named Earl Webb that played for Boston Red Sox in 1931, and he had 67 doubles. So I don't think he's breaking that record, but he could get some rarefied air with Ducky Medwick, a guy named George Burns, not the Gracie Allen, George Burns, different one. Remember Hank Greenberg, Paul Wainer, who was Big Poison. There was Big Poison, Little Poison on the Pirates, and Charlie Gehringer, who hit 60. So he's got 55. Let's see if he can get 60. That'd be pretty cool for the record books. Hasn't happened since 1936. So that's pretty cool. And let's see. Oh, they're talking about expansion in baseball, but they got to fix a few things. One was Oakland. It looks like they're going to Las Vegas. Apparently they are. Now it's Tampa. They've got the ballpark, their fandom. They show up when they're in the pennant races, which they've been doing really good lately. But it looks like they're going to get a new stadium down there in Tampa, not far from where the old one is. It's going to be more fan friendly, and it looks like the owner's going to buy half, and the taxpayers will get the other half. If that goes through, it looks good. If not, Tampa Bay may be moving to a different city. Have you heard anything about that, Vince, on the Tampa Bay Rays?
What I've heard the same thing you've heard, that they're looking to build a new stadium. It's going to be a small stadium, 30,000 seats, something like that, which is what they would need to have like looking like a full stadium. The issue that I keep reading is that one of the major problems is just the location, that's not an easy area to get to in St. Petersburg, but there's nowhere in Tampa Bay proper, because Tampa Bay's on the other side of the bay where all the traffic is and all the arteries that would make it convenient to go to a game. They just do not have space in Tampa to put the Rays, and that's why they've tried to find a place in Tampa. They can't. So they're kind of settling, okay, we're going to put it in the same neighborhood. But one of the issues that I keep reading is that's one of the inherent problems with the stadium is the location. So that may be a reason why they may have issues getting that pushed through. So I've been to Tampa Bay. I've never been to St. Petersburg. I just know that the beach is very beautiful there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to do down there. They've been so good. I hope they stay there. I'd like to see teams stay and build that history and tradition, which is baseball is based on. I know Milwaukee, there's talk of Major League Baseball wants them to fix up the stadium or make it better. I don't know what they're doing there. I know Kansas City's getting a new ballpark. Makes me sad, but maybe it's time, moving it downtown. So there's a lot of things going in baseball before we get the expansion. So we'll see what happens there. But I hope all the teams stay. I like the leagues the way they are. I don't want to mix and match in American League and National League teams. And we'll see what happens. So that's a lot going on in baseball right there. So I guess it's Cardinal news. And Vince, I got a lot of things going on with Cardinal news. The Cardinals this weekend, I think it was just Sunday, reached 3 million fans. And that's 18 years in a row, and that's paid tickets, not the giveaways and stuff like that. So 3 million, 18 years in a row, and that's really good. I credit a lot of it to it's like a tradition here. Other folks watching around we have people outside the United States watching this and listening to us, and people in different parts of the country. But hockey's like number 2, soccer's moving up, but Cardinal baseball around here, and it's just, I don't know, it's just family, it's just tradition. And people, I'm from Arkansas originally, and people will plan their vacations about coming up and seeing a couple of Cardinal games when they can. So that's pretty cool. And 18 years in a row, 3 million fans, but they have great giveaways. And now, if we play this bad for the next 2 or 3 years, we're probably not going to get to that 3 million number. But so far, so good. 18 years in a row. And we'll see what happens. Let's see. I've got so many notes here about the Cardinals. Let's see. Jordan Walker, our prize young player, he's coming along. His defense is getting better in the outfield. He became the 4th youngest Cardinal to reach 100 hits. And shoot, when you're with that kind of history we've had with all these years, that's pretty cool. Roger Hornsby's number one. He was the youngest in age player to get to 100 hits in Cardinal history. I didn't write down number two, but three is Gary Templeton, and now four is Jordan Walker. So I couldn't tell you who that second guy is, and I'm embarrassed I didn't write that down.
So BB Richards.
It's BB. Yeah. We always work. Vince, you're a master of working in the BB Richards references. We had some people go on the DL. Nolan Gorman, I just heard from Vince a while ago, went on the DL. Gallegos, our bullpen guy, has a shoulder issue. We're out of it. Rest, get ready for next year. And Tyler O'Neill, who spends, I'm not going to say anything negative, but he's on the DL quite a bit. And he's built like a linebacker. You would think this guy, but he's always got a twinge here or there. So Tyler's out again, and I wish him a healthy off season. We probably won't see him again this season. The Roberto Clemente Award. We have our finalists. They're going to be naming it. I think during the World Series, they named the winner. Paul Goldschmidt is the Cardinal representative for the Roberto Clemente Award. And Roberto Clemente, one of the greatest ball players. He was before my time. I didn't get to see him play. Right fielder, I hear one of the greatest arms, but even a better person off the field, the great humanitarian. And and every player always says it's a huge honor. They don't really pay attention to the awards, but that's one they all are very proud to be even nominated for. So I'll let you talk about the Cub representative, but Paul Goldschmidt's the Cardinal representative. I got my Goldie, everything's backwards here. The Goldie jersey in the background back there. Big news. Big news, Vince. This is, you guys know, shaking in your boots. Ollie Marmol is back for 2024. Woo! You know what? God love him. It's a horrible year this year, but I wish him all the best. All the bad luck goes our way next year, and we get the good luck. But I kind of think Mr. Schultz should still be the coach of the team, but that's my opinion. And but I still want Marmol to do good. I want the Cardinals to do good. And
speaking of I'm paying attention. What I'm having to do is look up who the Cubs representative for the Roberto Clemente Award is, but you put me on the spot.
No, I did not mean to throw you under the bus, Vince.
No. But speaking of Schilt, just want to interject a little story. I was like I said, I'm in some fan groups, and the number one question that pops up on all these fan groups for the Cubs is, Ross needs to be fired. Who's gonna manage the team? And everybody says Joe Girardi. He's in the booth, take him down. Yeah, he's a great guy. Joe Girardi managed 14 years, had one World Series championship with a very loaded Yankees team. With many years as a very loaded Yankees team, he had early exits in the playoffs. The Marlins, he managed 1 year there, and there was a player revolt, and he left because they said, we don't want him here. The Yankees kind of unceremoniously kicked him out the door, and the Phillies fired him mid-season last year, and that team wound up in the World Series. This guy is not a good manager, okay? So I put down in the little chat box, being the question of the moment is, who would be the next manager of the Cubs? I said, basically, what do people think about Mike Shildt? And man, I had people, just piling on to me. Oh, we're still in the playoffs race. You just saying nasty things about me. So I said, F this group. And I completely just got out of that group. I thought, okay, I'm asking a legitimate question. If everybody's going to ask the same question, and I answer with Joe Girardi, think outside the box a little bit. Who is the best manager out there? I still think it's Mike Shildt. So anyway,
he's paid his dues. He's come up from being a shoe shine boy to working and selling popcorn to coaching to managing, and worked his all the way up. He's done nothing but win. And the only he's a nice guy in the interviews, but he's kind of a hothead too. But you got to have a guy who goes out there and gets fired up every once in a while. I like that. But he didn't agree with the, I fought the law and the law won. He fought the admin, and You ain't going to win that fight. And he's down in San Diego now. And by the way, their defense has improved. The Cardinals under Schilt, our defense was getting shaky under Matheny. Schilt comes in, and we look much, much better on defense. So I have nothing but good things to say about Mike Schilt. And Mike, anytime you're available, you're always have a home here, one Cardinal, one Cub, and one beer. The Cardinal week this week. I'll just get into last week we had a winning week. We were on the road. This week we finished our last game on the road and we beat Baltimore Wednesday 1-0. We had a day off Thursday. We got to play the Phillies. And the Phillies the last couple of years have been a real thorn in our side. They knocked us out of the playoffs last year on their big run to the World Series. Well, Friday we lost to them 5-4. It was a winning game. We left a ton of men on base. It's been the problem. I saw a statistic, Vince. We're fourth in hitting with nobody on base. With scoring position, we're 28th. I don't know what happens. I don't know if we get the tight cheeks or what. I don't get it either, but I know our guys can hit. We just don't hit when it counts. And really, does that matter if you can't hit when it counts? So we lost 5-4 to Philadelphia, left a lot of men on base. Saturday, it wasn't even a competitive game. They beat us 6-1. And then Sunday, we salvaged a win and won at 6-3. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Monday's game, and this is the one I really want to focus on. Waino was pitching. God, I love Waino. And he pitched 7 innings, and I don't think his fastball reached mid-80s. And he was moving the ball in and out, up and down. The guys were out there diving for him. Arenado almost ran into the stands to catch one. Richie Palacios dove and gave it his all. Wynn was like Superman out there diving for that ball that he didn't come up with, but the team just played great behind him. Wilson Contreras, a great Cub and a great Cardinal, hit a laser beam, and he's been red hot lately over the wall, and Waino gets number 200. Now, I've heard people say 200, well, that's 200 wins. So I'm telling you what, there's only 122 players in all the history of baseball with 200 wins. And Vince, I was going to ask you a few questions. I'm not putting you on the spot because most people don't know this. I didn't know this until I looked this up. But in our division, the Brewers, how many players do you think the Brewers have that won 200 games in a Brewer uniform, would you say?
In a Brewer uniform, I'd say none.
None. The guy who won the most games in a Brewer uniform was Jim Slayton, who won 117. That's it.
Oh, I thought it'd be Teddy Higuera.
Higuera's in the top 5, but
Yeah.
it was Jim Slayton, won 117. Cincinnati Reds, how many Reds, the oldest team in baseball, how many guys won 200 games in a Reds uniform?
I'll say none again.
0. Their winningest pitcher is a guy named Kappa Rexley with 179. A name we all know. Number 4 is Joe Nuxhall, who was like the youngest player that ever, like 15 years old, was pitching in the big leagues during World War II. He won 130. So they're not even close, those two teams. The Cubs, how many Cubs do you think won 200 games in a Cub uniform, pitchers?
I'll go with 3.
1. And he
30.
won 2. It was Charlie Root who pitched.
See, I had Root in there too, but I thought Fergie may have won 200 with the Cubs.
Well, Root won 201. Mordecai Brown won 188, Three Fingers Brown. And Fergie won 167 as a
those were the 3 I was thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's a great history. But that just shows you how hard it is. And the Pirates had one. A guy named Wilbur Cooper had 202 with the Pirates. And Bob Friend is 4th, a guy more current than most of us would know. And he had 191. So he's 4th. So they've got a lot of guys close to 200. So that shows you how hard it is to win 200 games. There is only 18 pitchers that won 200 games. Let's see. I got that stat somewhere around here. I'm sorry. It's 38 pitchers have won 200 games with one team. And it's led by the Braves and all the incarnations, the Boston Braves and and the Milwaukee Braves, the Atlanta Braves. There's 5 guys that won over 200 games with them, and the New York Giants or San Francisco Giants have 5 pitchers that won 200 games for them. So that's pretty cool. The Cardinals have 3 now. We're tied with the Dodgers, the Guardians / Indians, and the Yankees. Teams with 2 are the White Sox and Phillies, and then 8 teams have 1 player with 200 wins. So I just wanted to read that off and go over that because it just shows you how hard it is to win 200 games. And the Cardinals are going to finish out this little stance right now with the Brewers, and I have nothing but class to say about the Brewers. We have had a lot of last year when Yachty and Waino had their 325th start. It was against the Brewers, and Yelich did not swing at the first pitch because he knew they wanted to keep that ball. That's just a classy little classy move right there. I got nothing to say bad about Council and the Brewers. They're classy.
Pete Alonso would have swung at it.
They're going to make the playoffs. yeah, he sure would have. And throw it in the stands. He would have got that thing out of there.
Screw this.
But man, stick it, Cardinals. But Waino, what? And there was times this year, every win, it's tough to get a win. I mean, I never even got asked to be in rookie ball, nothing. And these guys have worked themselves up, got to the pros, 200. If you win 15 games a year and play 10 years, you still got only 150 wins. It's amazing to get to 200. The 300 guys, I can't even imagine. And the 400, there's a few 400 and one 500. That's just amazing that they got that. And he's a class guy, and he's been doing a lot of interviews now because that's a major accomplishment. And he's only got a week and a half to go. He may not start another game. I don't know what they got planned. But today on the MLB channel, they said, is there anything you'd like to do? And he said, I'd like to get one more at bat. I'm going to talk to Ollie about that. So that last game, I got a feeling we might see old Yachty come back. Let him DH.
Yeah.
Send him out there for an at bat. That crowd would go crazy. The crowd would have one at bat.
Play the whole game DH last game of the season.
Oh, yeah. That would be great. He's hit a few home runs. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't it be something
if you drove in like 5 runs with runners in scoring position? Where the heck you been all year? I've been on the mound.
Yeah, I've been on the mound. So that's my Cardinal news. I wanted to end with Waino, and as a Cardinal fan, that's just another moment. We've got we seen it coming, and it didn't look like it was good. It looked like he's going to get it no problem. Then it looked like, oh my God, he's been on the DL, IL, injured reserve, IR, and we didn't know if he was even going to get to come back. He's had 2 big injuries in his career, and the second one they didn't think he'd come back from, and here he is all this time later. So 1-0. What a game he pitched, and it was so much fun last night. And that's my Cardinal news.
You mentioned a player that reminded me of a great story, and I wish I could remember the details. But Joe Nuxall, he for years was the commentator on their radio broadcast. And like you said, Nuxall during World War II at the age of 15 became the youngest player ever to pitch in the major leagues. So they had this deal on the radio during a rain delay during a game. Well, like a rain delay, not during the game, but during a rain delay, they would have fans call in and ask Joe and I guess Marty Brenneman questions. And so from the clubhouse, I want to say it was during the time of the Nasty Boys, and I want to say it was either Charlton or Randy Myers called in and asked a legitimate question, and they gave, their baseball knowledge answer. And then he said, Joe, is it right that you were once a major league pitcher? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, man, Joe, I've seen pictures of you lately. You've really let yourself go. And Nuxall said, listen, buddy, if you want to come here and tell that to my face.
Oh, man. The Nasty Boys were a fighting group, too.
Oh, that's a great story. Man. I love that.
Oh,
so anyway, last week, Max said that we could not be negative on this show unless we went a week. Our team did not win a game this week. Well, Max the Prophet, we didn't win a game this week. Now, granted, since our last recording, we've only played 3 games, okay? And we were 0-3 since our last recording being recorded on Wednesday. Now, I know when baseball teams hit a skid, it seems like the problems just tend to multiply, and it kind of becomes a rolling stone down a hill. It's hard to stop it. And we're in one of those skids where everything has gone wrong. And if this was going on in April or May and we came out of it, we'd forget about it because we were in some bad skids in April and May. But we've kind of been spoiled because we were so good in July and August that it was like, man, we are going to, we might not just get a wild card spot. We may overtake the Brewers. I mean, I said that on here, you know, I was so confident in everything. But the Cubs have hit the skids, and this is how bad it was. We were swept this week by the Diamondbacks in Arizona, and that's a week after we lost 3 of 4 in Wrigley. The difference is when we played them in Wrigley, we had to face Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly. They're only 2 good pitchers. The 3 pitchers we faced in this series all have ERAs north of 5. We had Steele going, and then after Steele, we had Hendricks, and then after Hendricks, we had Wicks. We were set up to take 2 of 3 or possibly 3 of 4. We lost all 3 games, and we were only in the second one, which went 13 innings, and we should have won that, but we have played terrible baseball. Aside from the other things that have happened, the injuries, and I'll get into that in just a moment, we are banged up. The players on the field have been playing terrible baseball. And I'm not just talking about players who normally wouldn't play that much. I'm talking about Dansby Swanson, get a freaking hit with runners in scoring position. We've been waiting all year long for your offense to at least approach your defense. His offense has been atrocious this year. He's hit his home runs. He's driven in some meaningless runs, but when things have counted, he has not shown up at the plate during big moments. Ian Happ, the same thing. Hitting about 240. He's got a huge on-base percentage because he's going to have over 100 walks. He's not hitting with a whole lot of slug. He's playing terrible defense in left field. It's like, I want a gold glove. I'm a great left fielder. Well, I don't know. I guess you don't work on your craft anymore because you have been one of the worst left fielders in the National League this year. And the metrics point that out. He's been atrocious in left field. These are 2 players that needed to show up, and they haven't showed up this year offensively and defensively. At least Swanson has been everything that he was billed to be. Happ has not showed up defensively, and it's driving me bananas. In our last 5 games, going into last week, we are 0-5, and every pitcher that we have faced in this 5-game losing streak has had an ERA north of 5. The last 2 games we played in Colorado and these 3 in Arizona, we should have won 4, minimum 3, and we went 0-5 in that stretch. So we were firmly entrenched with a second wild card spot. We are now fighting for that 3rd wild card spot, which, oh yeah, you're still in it, you're still in it, you're still in it, okay? This is what we have left. Tonight, we start a 3-game series at home against the Pirates. And then we have a 3-game series at home against the Rockies, 2 of the worst teams in the National League. We have to win 5 of 6 of these games. I think we need to sweep both of these games, and I'll tell you why, because the last 2 series, we are in Atlanta for 3, and then we're in Milwaukee for 3. And I guarantee you, even if Milwaukee has a sun up, they are not going to roll over for the Chicago Cubs. You think that Cardinal Cub rivalry can get heated? This is a friendly rivalry. They hate us in Milwaukee because when we play in Milwaukee, we take over their stadium, and the faithful do not like it because the massive population from Chicago with their money buys up tickets, and it just becomes what has been known as Wrigley North. and the Brewers don't like it, and they're not going to roll over for us. So this is the way I look at it. We have to win 8 of these next 12 games to secure a playoff spot. And I'll get into that right now. The problem isn't just that there are 6 teams fighting for 3 wild card spots. The problem is this for the Cubs. Of those teams fighting for the wild card spot, the Phillies have the tiebreaker versus us. We're not going to catch the Phillies. The Reds have the tiebreaker versus us. The Diamondbacks have the tiebreaker versus us, and the Marlins have the tiebreaker versus us. So basically, we could tie either of those four teams with the last position, and we're out of it. Now, the only team that still has a shot that we would win a tiebreaker with is the Giants, and they're still like 2.5 out. So they're not one of the teams that's bunched up with the rest of us. That's why I'm saying we have to win 8 of these next 12 because we cannot finish tied for that last spot with anybody but the Giants. We have to win.
You like that rule? That's a newer rule. Used to, if you ended, no matter what happened in the season, if you ended with the same record, there was playoff games. But now there's so many playoff games.
Yeah,
they got
they have to do
rule.
that. And that leads me to this. And I know people are sick of me saying this, and I haven't said it much since April and May. Those games in April and May counted. When we broke spring training and we didn't have a right fielder and we had no idea who the heck was going to come out of the bullpen, and we said, oh, we're going to start the bullpen by just matching things up. No, that's the start of the season. You better have things set up from the beginning because April and May games count. They're not there for you to figure out what you're going to do with your damn team. So there's my negative rant. And I know
they always say you. Oh, I'm sorry. They always say you can't win the division in April and May, but you sure can lose it in April.
Yeah,
that's what we did.
Who did we play then early? We played the Marlins, and we lost some games that we could have won. We played the Reds early. The first time the Reds came into town, we had no idea that they were going to steal 30 million bases against us. We were just caught by the Marlins and the Reds. We were just completely caught with our pants down to running teams at the beginning of the season. It's like in spring training, we didn't even work on trying to hold runners on, and they just ran us out of the stadiums. And now, because of their running and our lack of any ability to shut down that run, because a lot of times we were starting Tucker Barnhart, who couldn't throw out my grandma, who's been dead for 40 years, by the way. Those games counted. And I put most of the blame on Ross, but I also put blame on Carter Hawkins and Jed Hoyer because they did not have a roster when they broke spring training camp that adequately filled all the positions that we needed filled with defense first. When we had Miles Mastrobuoni out in right field for the first game, and we had Trey Mancini out there in right field, and we were putting Hosmer and Mancini at first base when obviously their defensive skills were terrible, and we had Yan Gomes and we had Amaya in the minor leagues, but we kept putting out 40% of the time Tucker Barnhart for the first part of the year. We lost games because of that. We should not be in this position. I know we're banged up. Since Alzolay has been injured, and even though he only went on the IL about a week and a half ago, he hasn't been right for about 3 weeks. He was trying to pitch to it. They're trying to give him extra days rest, but they needed to shut him down. Since that's happened, it's had a ripple effect because we haven't had our closer, and that meant that we had to rely on Leiter Jr. and Merriweather to close. Leiter Jr. has what appears to me some arm fatigue. His splitter is not splitting like it should be, and he has just had a rough month of September because he's never pitched this many stressful innings. Merriweather's had his issues. So what are we doing? Like the other day, Hendricks is throwing a good game. We have to bring in Quas in the, I think it was like the 6th inning, and he gives up a 2-run home run. We're having to pitch players who shouldn't be pitching in these high pressure, high stressful situations. We had Fulmer come back after a long stint on the injured list, and he went right back on it with a forearm strain. So we're missing him out of the bullpen. Boxberger's back, but we're not quite sure what he is because he's been gone since like the second week of the season. So obviously Ross doesn't trust him that much because he's barely been out there. So we're putting a lot of stress on the bullpen, and I understand that injuries do have something to do with this. But my argument is this: if we would have played better in April and May and June, particularly April and May, whenever we didn't even have a right fielder because Suzuki was injured at the beginning of the year, if we would have done a better managed team at that point in time, maybe we'd have 3 or 4 more victories now, and this wouldn't be so dire that it has become. Madrigal has just been put on the IL today. Candelario is out tonight. At third base, we have Christopher Morel, who has not played third base since last year. And last year, when he played third base a few times, he was terrible. We don't have anyone else out there. We've recalled Jared Young from AAA, but I don't think he's with the team yet. And Young's been playing some third base in Iowa, but he's more of a first baseman. He's not a defense first person. So we've got Morel at third, and at first base, we have Wisdom. So we have 2 guys who can't field their positions on the corners. We have Assad pitching tonight, who is a pitch to contact guy. And if we think we're going to just cakewalk over the Pittsburgh Pirates, possibly we will. We do have Assad going tonight, and he has had his moments. And they have some guy going that maybe we can knock out with a 8-run second inning. I don't know. I can see us losing an 8-7 game to this team due to defense. Designating hitting tonight is Alexander Canario, who's been with the team for 3 weeks and had 1 at bat, and that was a strikeout. That's how depleted we are. We have Canario playing DH tonight. I would have rather seen them put I know the Pirates have a left-hander going, but I would have rather seen them put PCA in center field and had Bellinger at first and Wisdom DH or Wisdom at third and Morel DH than this thing we got going now. I would rather sacrifice maybe Pete Crow Armstrong, who's had like 10 at-bats and hasn't got a hit yet. What's the difference? He's not hitting right-handers, left-handers, but by golly, he can catch the dang ball. And that's what I'm worried about tonight is the defense. So it feels good to get that off my chest. So that's why this team
now
makes me drink. This is so reminiscent of 2004. And I know Cardinal fans don't remember 2004 because you guys won like 104 games and ran away with the division.
Oh, that's right.
We were in firm control with a couple weeks left of the wild card, and we actually had more victories than we had the previous year when we were 5 outs from the World Series. We had a good team in 2004. In the last 2 weeks, we folded like a cheap suit. And that collapse really hurt us. And the repercussions were major. We didn't come out of that until Lou Piniella became our manager. That was the year that Steve Stone was very critical of the Cubs, saying, this team is too good for this. They've cashed it in. And players went to management about it and got him fired. He's been with the White Sox ever since. That was the year Chip Carey was criticizing. I can't remember who it is. One of the pitchers he was criticizing. And sometimes you do that as a commentator and as a play-by-play person. If you see someone who is not performing good and not giving their best effort, call them out. Well, during the game, I can't remember who the pitcher was. He called up to the booth during the game. It was a mess the last few weeks. We folded like a cheap suit. So we don't have those issues, but I am seeing I have the similar feeling that oh gosh, we're doing it. We had this under control and we're sinking. Big picture, we have 78, 79 wins. I can't remember which one. We should finish in the low to mid 80s in victories, which we were projected to have from Dakota 78 wins. Big picture, it's been a good season. We've exceeded our expectations. I didn't think we would be a playoff team this year. I didn't think we would be a contender, but we are playing meaningful games late in the season, and I'm happy about that. but I'm a fan and I'm greedy. I'm like, okay, you've brought me here. Now take me all the way. You've made out with me in the back seat. Now take me all the way. That was the most politically incorrect thing I have said on this show. So, oh, but anyway, JJ, I am so down. You know what I need to do?
There's only one thing. There's only one thing that can bring you back up and put a smile on your face. And I think you know who that is.
That is DMDR with Mr. Jeremy Connor. Comes a time in every man's life when he needs some advice on relationships. You need to listen to the podcast DMDR, which stands for Dating, Marriage, Divorce, Remarriage, from my good friend Jeremy Connor, the Dr. Phil of the Boot Hill. You can find DMDR on Spotify or whatever platform you choose to listen to your podcast. Thank you, Jeremy. I feel much better.
I need a cigarette.
All right, JJ. We decided we're going to do a spotlight on a couple of different seasons, and I picked the 1977 Cubs. Speaking of teams that folded in the second half, and you picked who? The 13-12 Cardinals. I know it's an old team.
1926 St. Louis Cardinals.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know much about the 26 Cardinals? Just off the top of your head?
First World Series champion.
First World Series champion. Can I start? Because you know me, you get me wound up, I'll get fired up.
Go ahead, sir. I was just going to say, I've lived in St. Louis area. I'm 57 years old. Lived in Kansas City for 3 places. So a total of 49 of my 57 years, I've lived in the St. Louis area. So yes, I am very well versed on Cardinal history and that they won it in 1926. So
if you go to the ballpark, you'll see, all the world championships, and 26 is right up there. It's all over the ballpark. And not only was that our first championship, that was our first time ever to the World Series. That was also our first pennant. The Cardinals never had won anything. No St. Louis team had ever won anything. So this was new ground. Now, if you remember 26, the thing that always reminds me in baseball is the 1927 Yankees, which is considered the greatest baseball team ever. That's Murderers Row. So we're playing in 1 year before they become the greatest team. And maybe the Cardinals had a little bit to do with that. Maybe that losing that year in 26, that give them that fever to run and just destroy everybody in 1927. I don't know. Maybe we had a little bit to do that. But 26, it was our year. And there was only 8 teams in the National League. So I'd like to do a little history here. The Cardinals won the division by going 89-65, and there was no playoffs. It was just you play the regular season, 154 games. Today they play 162, so that hasn't changed a whole lot. But there was only 8 teams, and there was one division, and so the 8 teams lined up. We beat the Cincinnati Reds that year by 2 games, so the Reds were pretty good too. Third place was the Pirates. Fourth place was the Cubbies. We had the Giants. The Cubs, fourth place. And they weren't that far out. I think you guys only finished like 7 games out that year. So the Cubs were pretty good that year too. The Giants, the Brooklyn Robins. I never heard of them. The Brooklyn Robins finished, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7th was the Braves, and 8th, the Phillies. Suck it, Phillies. They were in last place in 1926. Okay, so
that was before
it was our first pennant. Yeah, that was for Harper and Schwarber and all those guys that hit the daylights out of the ball. So I mentioned the 27 Yankees, and that was one of the greatest teams ever assembled. Maybe experts say the greatest team ever assembled. And that I'm going to break down the season. I won't get too crazy with statistics, but in April we were 8-8, and we just spoke a while ago about the Cubs and the Cardinals. We got buried at the beginning of the season. Well, they were 8-8, and they were in 5th place out of 8 teams. May comes along, and we go 15-16, and we're in 5th place still. June comes along, and we go 16-6. So as the summer comes and everything's heating up, the Cardinals get a little hot, we go to 2nd place. July comes along, we go 14-16. So our second losing month, 2 losing months, 1 winning month, and we're in 3rd place. And in August we go 22-8, in
Wow.
September 14-11, and we finished in first place. And it was a tough, I mean, man, baseball was rough back then. These guys, if they weren't in the big leagues, they had to go back out and work in the mines or the farming or something like that. So these guys, I mean, it wasn't, I got a twinge in my back. They played all out. And there are still players today that do, but we do have a lot of guys that seem to miss a lot of time. They only spent, let's see, September 16th, they were tied for first, and we stayed in first place the rest of the year. So down the stretch, we only caught first place right there at the tail of at the end of the year. The Cardinals had a real durable pitching staff that year, led by a guy named Flint. His first name was Flynn. His last name is Wren. He had 20 wins. Bill Sherdell was 16-12, and he's like 5th all-time in Cardinal wins. A young knuckleballer, Jesse Pop Haynes, who's the second 210 wins in Cardinal history, and he went 13-4 that year. And the Cardinals, as a team that year, hit 286. So that's a good team batting average. We had a catcher named Bob O'Farrell, and he was the MVP of the National League that year. He hit 293 and had 30 doubles. So he was the MVP. We had Jim Bottomley at first base, and Bottomley had 120 RBIs and 40 doubles that year and 305 total bases. So he was – now, this also was the first year Roger Hornsby, our second baseman, was the player manager. And now he only hit 305, but he was winning every batting title through those years. And I think being the manager really took a toll on him because it was the first batting title he hadn't won in like 5 years. And Paul Waino from the Pirates won the batting title that year. So he did a great job managing. I don't think he was very popular with the players. Kind of like how you were talking, like who was that catcher that everybody says is a great guy, but he doesn't win? And we were talking about a while ago. I think the players kind of had a revolt against him because he's pretty tough on them. We had a shortstop named Tommy Trevello, and he had 11 home runs. I'll get back to him a little bit later. Third baseman Les Bell. Billy Southworth, who later coached a team in the 40s, was an outfielder for us. And Chuck Heffley was also like a super utility guy. So that was our team. We're going to go into the playoffs or into the World Series, and we're going to face the mighty Yankees. And of course, Ruth and Gehrig, I think the greatest 1-2 combination in baseball history. You can't get no better than Ruth and Gehrig. They also had Earl Combs, and Ruth did not win the MVP that year. And I think when I go through his stats here in a little bit, you're going to like, how can this guy not win the MVP that year? The Yankees were 91-63, and they were 3 games better than the Cleveland Indians that year. And Ruth had 47 home runs, and the closest guy to him, he had 28 more than anybody else in the league that year. That's just amazing. Yeah, Babe Ruth. I mean, if you go back and look at these stats, but what you do is you compare him to all the other players. He was just hands down better than everybody else, and he could pitch too. But he never did both really at the same time, full time. So Otani has him beat in that area. But Ruth, 47 home runs, 28 more than anybody else. He had 139 runs, 144 walks, 146 RBIs, and he did not win the MVP because our old friend, Mr. Double himself, George Burns of the Indians, had the MVP that year. So now we're getting to the World Series. And Vince, this is a great matchup right here. This World Series, sometimes when you look back in time, you say, like the Cubs, when they won in 2000, what was it, 16 you guys won? Was it 16 you guys won the World Series? How many Hall of Famers do you think will be from that team? Do you think will be on that team? And what would you think? I'm trying to think. I don't know.
Chapman, maybe. Aroldis Chapman.
Yes. Maybe. Very good. Very good. It's hard.
Lester,
I mean, baseball's the hardest Hall of Fame to get into.
Yeah. Lester has an outside.
Yeah, that's a good. That's 2 good calls right there. Well, in this World Series, there was
Joe Madden. He'll go too.
14.
I said Joe Madden.
I'd like to see him come back. He did great Tampa Bay, great in Chicago. Angels, nothing seems to work in California. I'd like to see him come back and manage another team, St. Louis Cardinals, and take us to 3 straight, and then pave his way to the Hall of Fame. But anyway, in this World Series, there were 14 Hall of Famers played in this 7-game World Series. Two were umpires, so that's another thing. But 6 Cardinals, 6 Yankees, and here I'm going to kind of name this: Roger Hornsby, a Cub and a Cardinal, a Pete Alexander, the 3rd winningest pitcher in baseball history, also known as Grover Cleveland Alexander, and he was a very elderly. It was at the end of his career. Was this season right here? Bottomley, who I mentioned before, our first baseman. Heffley, who was like the utility man and a young player at the time. Let's see, Jesse Pop Haynes, our 2nd winningest pitcher in Cardinal history, and Billy Southworth, but Southworth went in as a manager, not a player, So that's kind of on him right there. And here's the Yankees, the 26 Yankees. Miller Huggins, their manager, one of the greatest managers of all time. You had Earl Combs, the outfielder. And if you look at his stats, fantastic. It's just he happened to be on a team with Ruth and Gehrig.
Yeah.
Speaking of the devil, Lou Gehrig, the greatest first baseman that ever played the game. Babe Ruth, I think the greatest player that ever played the game. Tony Lazario, and a pitcher named Pincock was their ace, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So here we go. We're in the World Series now. It's going to be tough, and I tell you what, this team is fantastic. And we start out in New York City. They beat us 2-1. Pincock pitches, and he beats Sherdell, and we lose 2-1 in New York. But in Game 2, we pull it out and win 6-2. And Grover Cleveland Alexander pitches a complete game. He's an older guy there, and it's hot. It's late in the year. It's October, but he's wearing long sleeves. And a lot of times, I've heard some stories maybe where he had some drinking issues. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you see a lot of pictures of him when he's older, he's got wearing long sleeves even in the summertime. But he comes in, does a heck of a job, and also Grover Cleveland Alexander was a Cub too. He's a Hall of Famer and a Cardinal and a Cub. So we beat him 6-2, and he pitches a complete game. So now we come back to St. Louis and we win Game 3, 4-0. And Jesse Pop Haynes, the knuckleballer, wins that game, and we shut him out. We shut out the Yankees. Game 4, the Yankees come back and win 10-5, and Hoyt beats Reinhardt, which I don't really know either of those guys too well. But now they're up 3-2. So we go back to New York, and St. Louis wins Game 6, 10-6, and Alexander pitches another complete game, and we beat him 10-2. So he could stay in the game longer because we had a nice, comfortable lead. And in the last game, Game 7, Jesse Haynes is pitching bases, and we win the game 3-2. We're the world champions. That's not a big surprise. But Haynes gets in trouble in the 7th inning. Bases are loaded, and they bring in Doyle Alexander, who just pitched a complete game the day before, gets a strikeout, gets out of the inning, and in the 9th inning of the game, we walk Ruth. Now, Ruth was ticked. I almost said a different word. Ruth was ticked because in this series, he had 11 walks. And he hit 300, but we walked him 11 times. Anytime, this is what we should have done to David Ortiz and those Red Sox. We should have just walked Ortiz, looking back on time, but we walked Ruth. Anytime there was somebody in scoring position, no way, you're getting walked, Ruth. He was ticked. He's on first base. The game's on the line. And out of nowhere, he takes off for second and tries to steal second base. O'Farrell, the MVP, throws down to second. Hornsby, the coach, manager, player, boom, tags him out. The World Series is over. We win it in 7 games. Just mass, that goes crazy. Mass hysteria. Dogs are sleeping with cats. It's crazy times. And if you've ever seen the parade, it was just massive. I've seen some pictures of the parade in 1926, and it's just wall-to-wall people. It's good times. In that series, it's like I said, our first world championship. The Yankees had won 4 in 6 years, so they were rolling at that point. And also in Ruth in Game 4 hit 3 home runs. He was the first player ever to hit 3 home runs in a single game. He only hit 4 in the whole series, but one game he hit 3. And he done that twice in his career. And there's only a few people that's hit that many home runs in a World Series game. Reggie Jackson, the famous, I believe, 1977 against the Dodgers. Albert Pujols did it against the Rangers. And Pablo Sandoval of the Giants actually hit 3 home runs in a single game. So that's kind of a big thing. Some of the statistics, the Cardinals, Bottomley, our first baseman, hit 345 in that World Series and had he was 29 at bats, 10 hits. He only struck out twice. And that was one of the things the Cardinals, the one thing we had on them is I think our pitching was a little deeper and we didn't strike out. Our team did not strike out. They struck out twice as much as us during the season. Bob O'Farrell, our MVP catcher, hit 304. Billy Southworth, future manager of the team, hit 345. And this young second baseman, and I had a stat on him. He hit 417. He had 10 hits and 24 at bats, and had 4 RBIs, and he hit a home run. And the home run was an inside the Parker. Hit an inside the Parker in the World Series. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine. I would be so hyper running around second, I probably would get lightheaded and faint. It just tacked me out as I'm passed out between second and third. Would be too excited. By the way, this kid, our second baseman, only had 4 home runs in the minors, and he had 2 home runs in the season. And I don't believe after this year he ever hit another. He had an 11-year career, and he never hit another home run his whole career. So
wow,
that's kind of wild that you come up big, like a David Freese did, or or somebody out of the blue just comes up and has this World Series. Billy Hatcher had those 8 hits in a row, something like that. Let's say. Oh, by the way, this is kind of interesting. I found a statistic, Vince. I hope you like this. The St. Louis Cardinals, we won the World Series. Each player got $5,584.51. That was the winner's share of the World Series. $5,584.51. The Yankees, each player got $3,417.75. So that was a lot of money back then. I can't imagine 1926 getting a check for $5,500. That's probably pretty cool.
For some of those players, that was the difference between whether or not they had to work in the off season.
Oh, definitely.
Hey, you get $5,000 bonus. You don't have to work in the off season.
Definitely. Now, this series here, we can kind of start to see the beginnings of what's going to come in the 30s, which is our, the Gas House Gang and some of those real good years we had coming up. So the Cardinals, even though the 20s, 26 was the only World Series of that decade, we had some good years in there, and 31 and 34 is coming. And a lot of these young players are making up. Our hitters was only I think the average age was 26.7 years. So we had a young hitting team. Now with Alexander on the team, our age on our pitching staff is a little older because he's like Waino. He pulls the age of the pitching staff up a little bit. But what a memory. Alexander will always be remembered for that. When they talk about the 26th World Series, they always talk about the Ruth trying to steal the base and get caught in the final out of the World Series, and Pete Alexander coming in. And by the way, he was one of the inaugural Hall of Fame guys in 1939. When you see that picture of the 10 guys, Pete Alexander is one of them, representing, I don't know who he went in with as a player. I have to look that up, but he played for the Cubs and he played for the Cardinals. So that's pretty cool. So Vince, 1926, that's what I got there.
Yeah, if you watch the Ken Burns documentary on baseball, when he's talking about that World Series, Alexander, after winning Game 6, got completely trashed and was in the bullpen, not thinking he was going to pitch, nursing a hangover when he got called in. So,
man, all
that, what was that's when men were men.
So, well, they said, yeah. Are you kidding? I have a Mountain Dew too many, and I'm not good for anything. The 20. What was I going to say? Oh, they say the reason that Ruth went for that base was he was mad because he got walked so much. So he's going to show us, sort of like getting hit with the pitch. Most of them try to steal a base the next time. So he's on base. Well, I'm going to get in scoring position now. I'll show you. And he got thrown out. So how about that?
What an idiot.
Thank you, babe. Thank you.
Oh, couple things I want to bring up before I get to the 77 Cubs. In my rant, I overlooked part of my notes. Marcus Stroman is back on the team. He did not do any minor league rehab. He's made 2 appearances out of the bullpen, and so he may be filling that closer's role if we ever had the need for a closer again this year. So I think it's pretty much in contract. He's got he's got a player's choice to opt in for his 3rd year next year, and I'm sure he's going to do it after being injured this year. He's probably figuring it's not going to make $20 million anywhere else, so I might as well exercise my player option. And if we have a healthy Stroman, if it was the reason he fell apart after London, that he had these hip and rib cage injuries and he's back, I'll be happy about that. Also, I did look it up. Marcus Stroman is our Roberto Clemente finalist, nominee. So that's really cool. And if you know anything about Marcus Stroman, you're not surprised. He's a very philanthropic type of guy. 1977 was a special year for me because that was the year we got cable, and it was the first year I could watch the Cubs on WGN. So even though I was a Cub fan, and I would watch some Cub games at my friend's house, even though he's a Cardinal fan, I'd go over there on a summer day. Hey, the Cubs are on. We watch some of this. This was the first year I could watch them whenever I wanted, because if I didn't want to go to school, man, I just didn't, because that's how I rolled as an 11-year-old. Yeah. But anyway, this is the first team I watched on a regular basis. And to kind of set up, before the season, our GM was, I can't remember his name because it's not important, some obscure guy, but he was elevated to one of the VP positions. So we had a GM opening, and our new GM was Bob Kennedy, who had a very long career as a GM. He was a player, and then he had, various jobs in upper management, GM. Cardinal fans may remember him as the father of Terry Kennedy, former Cardinal prospect, who you traded to the Padres to get Raleigh Fingers, who you quickly flipped to the Brewers, so on and so forth. But his first order of business was to fire the previous manager. Oh gosh, let me find the previous manager. What's that guy's name? Jim Marshall, yes, and not the host of the Hollywood Squares, a different Jim Marshall. So Kennedy decides that he wants to make a big splash and hire a big time manager. So his first call is to former Cub manager, a man who in his last team got fired by the Astros, Major League Baseball legend Leo DeRocher, who was only 113 at this time. DeRocher basically said, "I'm retired. I'm not coming out of retirement. I'm an old man. I don't need this excrement anymore." So Kennedy hired Herman Franks as the manager to succeed Jim Marshall. Franks is a very interesting guy. He was a lifelong Giant. He played poorly for the Giants. He also coached for the Giants on different levels, including the major league levels. And in 1965 through 69, he was the manager of the Giants. And in each one of his 4 seasons, they finished in second place, and that got him fired after 69. Remember, at this time, it was the Dodgers and the Giants. That was their chief rival. The Braves were very good at this time too. And he let me see, 65, the Dodgers, 66, the Dodgers, 67, the Cardinals, and 68, the Cardinals again. So he finished second to all those teams, and then 70 moved to the division. So even though he had a lot of success, he couldn't get him over the hump, so they fired him. So Franks stepped away from baseball, and he was a very astute businessman. He had different businesses, and he was a self-made millionaire. And when Kennedy approached him to manage, it's not like he needed the job. because he was a millionaire. And at this time, baseball players and coaches and managers just were not billionaires, but Frank's was. So we go into the season with a man who's been out of baseball for 8 years as our manager. We have a new GM, and we are very busy in the off season. You see this, you see this a lot. You don't see it as much as you used to, but when a new GM would come to a team, they'd make their stamp and they would make a lot of trades. And this is just some of the moves that you'd be familiar, names you'd be familiar with. He got Willie Hernandez as a Rule 5 draft from Philly. And Willie Hernandez won the MVP in 1984 for the Detroit Tigers. I think he won the Cy Young that year too. I don't know. He had a great year.
Yeah, won it all. Yeah.
So we had a very talented young pitcher that we got in the Rule 5 draft from Philadelphia. We traded Rick Monday, who was coming off a 32 home run season, our center fielder, and Mike Garman, who was a pitcher, and in exchange for Billy Buckner and Ivan DeJesus. So basically, we got rid of a starter, a decent center fielder, and a bullpen piece, and we got 2 starters because Buckner was our starting first baseman, and DeJesus took over at shortstop. We traded my favorite player at the time, Bill Madlock, and Rob Sparing, bench guy that we had. And we picked up Bobby Mercer and Steve Olivares. Now, this was also a very good trade for us because we traded Madlock, a starting player who was not known for his defense, was a great hitter, but not known for his defense, and Sparing, who was a bench piece. And we got Mercer, who was very good at the time, and Steve Olivares, who was a starting third baseman for us. So we got rid of 2 starters on our in the field, and we picked up 4 starters. So I think that's pretty shrewd move by the general manager Bob Kennedy at the time. Our pitching staff, we had Rick Rushell, who was just coming into his own. Bill Bonham, who was a very good pitcher, had some better years with the Reds than he did with the Cubs, but they were a much better team. Ray Burris, who had some great stuff. Mike Krukow, who was a very young pitcher, but went on to have some great moments. He won 20 games once.
Yeah.
In the bullpen, we had Dave Gusty at one time.
Pirate.
Yeah. One time he was the closer for the Pirates. We had Willie Hernandez in there, who became Cy Young winner MVP. We had, like I already mentioned, Mike Krukow, who eventually became an anchor in the Giants staff in the 80s. We had Dennis Lamp, who was a really good relief pitcher for a long time, was also on that great Detroit team in 84. And I think he went like 1,000,001. He was just great. We had Donnie Moore in the bullpen. Donnie Moore became a great closer for the Angels, gave up that unfortunate home run to Dave Henderson, the Red Sox in the 86 playoffs, and committed suicide. It was a very sad story, but he had a great arm. We also had Bruce Sutter, and this was the first year that Bruce Sutter was the closer. And I'll get into that in a little bit.
Oh, Lord.
As you can see, even though we were young, there was a lot of talent there. And on offense, we had a kind of a 2.5-headed monster at catcher. We had George Menawald, who did, I think, the majority of the catching that year. Steve Swisher, who also caught for the Cardinals, and Randy Hundley, who had been an all-star catcher for the Cubs in the 60s. He was still around as kind of the third string catcher, but he was also on the coaching staff. So he was actually a player coach on that team. And you don't see that anymore. You don't see a player who they say, okay, he's also a coach. There are a lot of players who are unofficial player coaches, like Wainwright, but he actually was a player coach for the team. On the infield, we had Bill Buckner, first base.
Great player.
Hall of very good, not Hall of great, but Hall of very good player. We had Manny Trio at second base, and this is when Manny Trio really came into his own defensively. He was top notch. And we had Ivan DeJesus at shortstop, like I already mentioned, and Steve Olivares on the infield. Now, there are 2 Steve Oliverases who have played Major League Baseball. Steve Olivares, who was an infielder for the Cubs and the Giants, and Steve Olivares, who pitched for the A's in the 90s. Don't get them confused. Not the same person, even though it's got the same obscure last name and the same very common first name. Our outfield, we had Jose Cardinal. He was finishing up his best year. In fact, he was kind of washed up by this time. We had Jerry Morales in center field, who also
yeah.
Cardinals, and Bobby Mercer in right field. And we had a bench that I liked. I really liked Larry Bittner, who was one of our main guys off the bench. He could come up and he could get a big hit. He was a first baseman, but I saw him once make a play in the outfield, a great play, and bang into a wall because he had no fear. And I think he got put on the shelf for a week for that one. But Bittner was one of my favorite players because he didn't have a whole lot of talent, but man, he gave it everything he got. We had Greg Gross, who had a really good career as a pinch hitter for the Cubs, Phillies. And we had a guy, fourth outfielder named Joe Wallace, whose nickname was Tarzan. Joe Wallace was one of the best defensive center fielders that the Cubs have had in my lifetime. But he wasn't a starter because he couldn't hit much. But he played a very shallow center field and he took away a lot of hits. And he prescribed one of the first outfielders I saw that prescribed it's easier to run back on the ball than to run in because you could judge the ball going back easier than you can coming in. So very good, kind of eccentric, not in the Bobert eccentric, I'm talking really eccentric. So so we had a good team. So the season starts, we have Herman Franks, who is a fiery guy, who doesn't need the job, but he puts his all into it. We started the season really good. Rick Russell emerges as a true ace at this time. And it was fun to watch Russell. His brother Paul was in the bullpen. They looked just alike, except Paul wore glasses. And they were the most unathletic looking guys you've ever seen. But Russell was an athlete. He could run, he could hit, he could field his position. And you saw this guy who looked like this overweight, dopey looking guy who just had so much athleticism. It was kind of weird to watch. Suter at that time became, I want to say, one of the first who was, this team has one closer and this is it. And I don't care if he's pitched 8 days in a row, he's pitching that ninth game if we need to win this. And he was that mode. We've kind of went back a little bit now. We have a closer, and then we have the guy who will close if the closer's been used 2 days in a row. But Suter was the man at every closing situation at that time. We got off to a great start, and for the first half of the season through June 28th, we were 47-22. Not many people realize or remember that first half was one of the best first halves we had ever had. To be 47-22. We had an 8.5 game lead in the National League East on June 28th. By the All-Star game, the Phillies had caught fire. Mike Schmidt, in particular, just put the team on his back. By the All-Star game, they had closed the gap to 2 games with us. But we're still in good shape. We've got this very good team. Our signature game of the year, and I watched this game, was July 28th. We were down 14-10 in the 8th inning against the Reds. And we pinch hit for both of our middle infielders, for DeJesus and Mick Kelleher, who was playing second base at that time. For DeJesus, we pinch hit Jose Cardinal, the outfielder. And for Kelleher, we pinch hit Greg Gross, who's also an outfielder by trade. So we scored 3 runs and we make it 14-13 going into the 9th, and the Reds tie it. So it's 14-14 going into extra innings. Since both of our replacements were typically outfielders, we had just one player left on the bench who was an infielder, and that was utility man Dave Rosello. So Cardinal actually stayed in the game and played second base.
Oh, I've never seen that before.
Rosello played shortstop. So what the Cubs did in this inning was, when a left-hander would be up, Rosello would move to second base and Cardinal would move to short. When a right-hander, they would switch positions. And the Reds, yeah. So in extra innings, we moved Cardinal to right field where Mercer plays, and we moved Mercer to the infield. And Mercer came up as a shortstop with the Yankees, so he was at least a little familiar with the infield. And so our infield has Mercer and Rosello. But we keep doing the same thing. If a left-hander's up, we wanted the better glove at the pull side, so we would put Rosello at second, move Mercer to short, because Mercer had been playing the outfield for years by this time. Right-hander comes up, they switch positions, and always having the better glove on the pull side. And the game went 13 innings. All in all, we switched positions on the middle infielder 12 times. And that's what stuck out with me with that game. I had never seen anything like that before. And I've seen that switch done once, maybe in an inning, but I've not seen it done like that before. But it's within the rules. So the Cubs ended up winning. It was a wild game. But after that game, we finished the season very weak. We got tired. And this is when the discussion after 69 and after this season, we really have to get lights because all these day games in this hot Chicago weather is wearing our team down. We finished 20-40 in our last 60 games to finish 81-81. But it was a great season. It was a fun season for me. Some of the highlights, Russell won 20 games that year and he had a 2.79 ERA. That was his coming out party. And there are people who have great arguments that Russell is the best pitcher, not in the Hall of Fame. If you look at his WAR and you look at his sabermetric statistics, he stacks up with Hall of Famers and above a lot of Hall of Famers. So you don't think of Rick Russell as a Hall of Famer. A lot of people actually do. Bruce Sutter saved 31 games that year, most of them in the first half of the season. His ERA, guess what his ERA was?
He pitched a lot of innings too. I'm going to say like 1.22.
Close, 1.34. And he struck out nearly 2 batters an inning that year. So Mercer
he scared the fire out of me. We had a good hitting team, but we couldn't hit him. He'd come in a game, and I'd never seen anything like it. Ted Simmons, who's a Hall of Famer, he would try to move up in the batter's box so he could catch that pitch before it would drop, and he'd throw a fastball past him. It was fun to watch, but he scared the fire out of me.
I remember Ken Reitz took him deep to win a ball game once on the splitter. I do remember that because it broke my heart. Mercer hit 27 home runs that year. Manny Trio batted 280. That was his first All-Star, and I think he had about 3 or 4 All-Stars. We traded him to the Phillies for some stupid reason. Jerry Morales hit 290 that year. Jerry Morales was a really good defensive outfielder. What did he get as a reward? He got traded to the Cardinals. I don't understand that. Buckner hit 284, decent, his first year with the Cubs. Steve Olivares, first year with the Cubs, playing third base, hit 299. And I think Madlock hit about 305 for the Giants. So they were kind of close. It was a pretty good trade at the time. DeJesus, who we also got from the Dodgers, along with Buckner. DeJesus had 595 assists at shortstop. It's the 5th highest total ever at shortstop. So he was busy with our ground ball pitchers. He also sold 24 bases that year. So that was the first year I had cable, the first team that I could follow on almost a daily basis. If I couldn't see the game, I could at least watch the highlights on the WGN News the next day. And it was a fun season for half a season. And as a kid, it was kind of sad to watch us the Cardinals even edged above us. I think we finished 4th. The skid was so bad. And that's when the Cubs used to have this for about a 15-year deal. The Cubs are going to hit a June swoon. That's kind of when that started, June swoon. You don't hear that anymore, but that's where it originated. So that's the 77 Cubs. You probably knew nothing about them people, and now you do. So what are you opening up, JJ?
Well, I have a surprise. None of those Rob Riegelman cars for me anymore. I'm moving uptown. I've got this set. They're a little bit bigger than normal cards. They're the large cards. Topps put these out. I'll have to open up one to see what year this is, but it's called Baseball Champions Yesterday and Today, and they're like postcard size.
Wow.
And I bought this pack because I see a Cub right there. And Vince, it's just like magic. When we name a player, usually when we open a pack of cards, one of those players show back up. There's not many cards in these packs, but I remember these packs and I hadn't seen them in years. There's only 5 cards in there and a puzzle piece. And I cannot tell. All I know is it says Hall of Fame right there on the puzzle piece. So we'll have to see.
Ray Shock.
Who'd you say?
Ray Shock.
Oh, it's Duke Schneider. It says on the back.
Okay.
It's a puzzle of the Duke himself. All right, I'm going to save that Cub for the last one. They have a great Hall of Famer here, the one and the only 511 wins, the one and only Cy Young.
Cy Young.
There you go. Cy Young. And there's his plaque, his Hall of Fame plaque, and Mr. Durable himself, Cy Young. Played for the Cardinals. I that's all I can really remember. As a kid, when I played wiffle ball, we had wiffle ball teams. I lived in a trailer park, and we'd play other trailer parks, and we'd play every sport. Street hockey, we'd have to get out of the street when the cars came. We'd play football in the field. We'd play until our football would go in the lagoon. Wiffle ball in the backyards. But this is the guy I always wanted to be like, Rod Carew, right there laying down the bunt. Yeah, with the Angels. Oh, Rod Carew. Oh, let's see here. Are you kidding me, Vince? When I give you your books, this is definitely something I'm going to send back with you. Who in the heck is that guy?
Is that Kingman?
Dave Kingman.
Yes.
That's Kingman, but he's with the Mets. Sorry about that. But King Kong Kingman himself, and on the back, when they're describing him, for some reason they have a picture of Babe Ruth. I guess they're talking about his power numbers and stuff like that. So how about that? Oh, King Kong Kingman, Vince's favorite, one of his all-time favorite players. You mentioned this guy a while ago, and I have to say, as a hitter, the greatest third baseman I ever seen, Mike Schmidt, right there. There he is. If I can get that clear off there. That guy, I'm telling you what, the Phillies owned us. They had Schmidt and Lazinski in the middle of that lineup. It was a star-studded team right there. And our old nemesis, Steve Carlton, made us pay for ever trading him over there. Kicked our butt. I met him once and I said, my grandpa would sit in his recliner and watch the Cardinals. And when he'd get mad, he'd slam that foot thing down and he'd stomp off into the kitchen. And I said, you sent my grandpa to the kitchen more than any other player. He goes, I beat you guys 5 times in 1 year. He knew exactly what he was doing. And the last one you mentioned just now, and when I see you, I'm going to give you this card, but Bill Buckner, right there in the Cubby uniform, getting ready. Yeah, great player. And like you said, great Hall of Good. Not quite a Hall of Famer, but he's a very, very good player. I'd love to have him on my team anytime. So anyway, it's neat to have these big old postcard type cards. You can see the pictures better. And Topps outdid themselves on that one. So that's why I opened up.
Okay. I've got the Dondress, 1991.
Yes. Ooh, good year.
We're going to start with a puzzle piece. Willie Stargell.
Maybe we can put Stargell and create some mutant. Duke Schneider and Willie Stargell. We'll put them together.
There you go. Former all-star closer for the Expos, Tim Burke.
Very good. Very good player. Yeah.
Hall of Famer, Ricky.
Oh, yes. Maybe the greatest leadoff man ever. That dude was something else.
And decent pitcher, Keith Comstock, pitching for the Mariners there.
Yeah, I didn't know much about him.
He came off 1989 and 1990. He had ERA sub-3.
Okay.
And he played for Japan. I forgot about that. So, yeah, he had a few good years coming out of the bullpen. Oh, El Presidente, Dennis Martinez.
Yes, Martinez. Yes.
Nicaragua. Former Cardinal, All-Star, almost MVP in '82, Lonnie Smith.
Lonnie skates. Stole a lot of bases. Philadelphia Philly.
That's one of the great nicknames. And I remember I can't remember who said this about him when he played in left field, that it was like Steve Martin playing left field. So Terry Bross.
He's an adventure. I don't think I know who that is.
I don't either. Kurt Stillwell played for the Royals and the Reds.
Yeah. Very good career. Yes.
Diamond Kings, Matt Williams, former All-Star third baseman.
Yes.
A lot of power there.
Oh, yeah. Great player. That three guys in that middle of that giant lineup, we couldn't get out. Will Clark, Kevin Mitchell, and Matt Williams. They just kicked our butts.
Former Tiger, Jeff Robinson.
Oh, yes.
Married to Mrs. Robinson.
Yes. Stop that wedding.
Oh, former Yankee third baseman Mike Patty Rulo. I always had trouble saying his name.
Great New York name.
Yeah. 28 home runs his rookie year, 32 home runs. He never batted above 240 for the Yankees. And he used to hit just these little doinky home runs right field porch. And we don't need that. We can find something better.
Yeah.
A shortstop for the Red Sox, Tim Daring.
Oh, yes.
We got him last week, David West. Former Twin, former Met.
Yes.
Solid. Oh, very good second baseman for those great Oakland teams of the late 80s, early 90s, Mike Gallego.
Oh, yes. I think he might have came over late in his career to the Cardinals, like a year.
Oh, this guy started with the Yankees, and he had a great nickname. At this time, he was playing for the Sox. I think his best year, he only hit 20 home runs, but in the minor leagues, he got the nickname Dr. Longball.
Oh, I like that name. Yeah.
And that had nothing to do with his hitting. He had testing issues.
Is that a Kiss song, Dr. Longball?
I think we've got this guy like 10 times in the past year. Former Cub catcher, former Cardinal catcher, Steve Lake.
We gotta get Steve Lake on here. That's it.
We
We're calling you out, Steve Lake. Come on in. We're subliminally putting that out there.
That's my cards. I want to tell you something. Today I listened to two Cubs podcasts, and the hosts were so depressed and everything, and they were angry and everything. So if you think I was angry, I was really kind of tame compared to what a lot of people are. But I knew when I got on here it would be therapeutic and I'd start to feel a little better. And let's see if I'm going to end up feeling better. Let me see how the Cubs are doing.
Come on, Cubs.
Come on. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. It's must have had a rain delay. It's 0-0 in the first.
Now, who they playing tonight? Who's the team they're playing?
Pirates.
The Pirates. Okay.
So, wow. So I can watch almost the whole game. Very cool. So
fantastic. How's the Cardinals doing? Since you got that open, can you give us an update?
Oh, certainly.
We got 67 wins. 67 wins.
You are down in the fourth 5-2 to the Brewers.
Well.
Yeah, the Brewers have a chip on the
shoulder.
They're not going to roll over for anybody.
Oh, no. And that pitching is dominant. I tell you what, the Dodgers are beat up right now. I know they got some stars, and Roberts does a great job with them. But that Brewer team, I think they could be like the Phillies last year. They made some good moves at the trading deadline. Craig Counsell, fantastic manager. Look out for those Brewers. They got the bullpen and the starters.
I just don't think they got the offense. Other games to note in the National League, the Reds are losing to the Twins 6-0. That's good news for the Cubs. The Marlins in the top of the ninth are beating the Mets 3-1. That's bad news for the Cubs. The Braves are on top of the Phillies 8-3 in the sixth. That's good news for the Cubs. And the Brewers are up, which is bad news for the Cubs. So, So anyway, thank you all for joining us. Our first episode going into our second year. Pretty cool. And remember to follow us on social media and like us and everything else. And JJ, you got anything to add?
In memory of Bob Barker, remember to spade and neuter those cats.
All right. Spay and neuter the cats. All right. Thank you all.